Let's begin.
There, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Today, things have gotten pretty busy at life, but I've made sure to prepare something very special for you for today as well. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for the fourth installment of my novel, Buried Secrets. I had a friend who disappeared. We see people are a combination of past experiences and genetic makeup, the outcomes of everything that has come before that point in their life. Although genetics may play a role, looking back, it is certainly my experiences that have had the greatest hand in sculpting the man that I've become. A life of nurture over nature, as it were. And really, reflecting on all that's happened, I'm actually pretty happy if that's the case. If I had not run the gauntlet of tribulations that have been my life, I may not have the genuine compassion for all that is truly sacred in my life. So much gets squandered. So many care so little, and for the longest time, I couldn't understand why. How could someone simply abduct a child, my friend, and leave her so tragically broken inside? For years, no one knew the answer except for Heather, but either she didn't remember or lacked the capability of speaking about what happened to her. In reality, it may have been better if she never did, never having to live through that hell over and over again in her mind. I think that's the real reason she was the way she was for so long. Can't say I blame her. The day Heather had been found, I was playing with my friend and her brother. My family had just moved back to the area, and I soon met up with my friend Jason to relive some old times. Sure, I'd heard that odd whispering in the woods before I was retrieved from his house, and I did find it odd that no one knew Heather had been found, underscoring the queerness of being picked up early. But the torrent of thoughts, ideas, and realms of possibility surrounding Heather's return had seized 100% of my cognitive nucleus. I asked both my parents a plethora of questions, interrogating them for all the information they knew about Heather, but neither gave me any. My mother told me that no one knew anything at the moment, only that she was alive and that her parents and brother were on their way to meet at the hospital, reassuring me that they would likely update our family with any further information gained. They were my parents, and I was not only forced to listen to them, I reasoned that they were probably right. It made sense that no one knew much of anything yet, and that the Smiths would inform us with any updates as soon as they were able. Still, it didn't make the wait any easier, and did nothing to quell the patience of a child. 2 days later, I would have my opening to see my old friend. I didn't want to bother anyone the following day. Even at that age, I realized that their family likely needed time to ask all the questions that I had, and then adjust to their new normal. But the following day, I couldn't take the waiting any longer, and I phoned my friend shortly after returning home from school. He wasn't home when I called. He was out with his father, running errands, so I had to leave a message with his mother. She told me nothing, but I also didn't ask. It wasn't until dinner when he called me back. I, of course, wanted to know everything, but all I asked him was how his sister was doing. When he told me that he really didn't know much more than I did, I was simultaneously disappointed at the sheer lack of information and confused as to how that was possible that her twin brother knew nothing. All he could tell me is that she still hadn't said anything, and yet was completely healthy, therefore theoretically having the capability for doing so. It didn't matter. I love Heather like a sister, maybe even more. I had to see her, and I asked Jason if maybe I could tag along with them to the hospital at some point. I was prepared to beg if I had to, but I should have known that wouldn't be needed. My friend put the phone down while he asked his mother nearby, allowing me to hear her answer with my own ears, distant and muffled as it was. Jason returned to the receiver and told me that he and his family would be heading up the following day, shortly after lunchtime. We chatted for a few more minutes before my own mother called me from the kitchen, informing me that my father was home and that it was time for dinner. I finished up my conversation with Jason, assured him that I'd call him back after dinner with the news of getting a note from my mother so that his parents could pick me up from school the following day. Hanging up the receiver, I turned towards the kitchen and practiced my speech. All I had left to do was to make happen all that I promised. I sat down at the table across from my mother and next to my father's plate, awaiting his arrival. I could hear him in the laundry room, leading to the back door, taking off his shoes and shuffling with his jacket. He didn't work every day, but the days that he did, we waited for him to have dinner. The look in my eyes must have given my intentions away, because my mother asked me almost immediately what was on my mind. I knew that if I could get her okay, then I may be able to supersede my father's. Dad was pretty big on school, and wasn't likely to allow me to skip half a day unless I was dying. So I looked at my mother in the eye and asked, "The Smiths are going up to the hospital tomorrow to see Heather, and I was wondering if I could go," I said, truthfully. She told me that, given the information, that she didn't foresee an issue with it. That's when I let the cat out of the bag. "We're going up around noon, and I was wondering if you could write me a note so that they could pick me up from school," and I began to explain. But my sentence was cut short when my father walked into the room. "What's going on tomorrow?" he asked, before anyone said anything, or even a hello. I wondered how much he had overheard already. "Well, your son has something he'd like to ask you," she said, looking from my father to me, as he took his place at the head of the table. I explained the situation again, and even though I was speaking to my father, I was looking at my mother, hoping to still get my answer from her. My effort was futile. "No," he said plainly. "You can go some other time. You need to focus on your schoolwork." "But it's only this one time," and I started to bargain, and he again cut me off. I would call Jason back that night after dinner, but not with the news that I wanted to give him. I wasn't allowed to go. That night, I found my way up into my room with a sullen feeling in my chest, pining to see my friend, wanting to know what happened to her. I started to feel like maybe my parents just didn't understand. Even then, I wondered why they just didn't take me themselves. But I supposed I reasoned that it was because visiting hours would nearly be over by the time I got home and got ready to leave, even later if Dad was working that day. As I climbed into bed, I wondered about all the possibilities that my young mind could conjure, most of them terrible, and I didn't know if the truth would be any worse. But I knew that knowing something would at least help put my restless mind at ease. And that's when I heard footsteps approaching my room from down the hall, and to my surprise, my door creaked open. It was my mother. and I was only surprised to see her because she never came to check on me. Well, this night was no different. Instead, she came to tell me that after dinner, and after I had gone to bed, she had had a talk with my dad and somehow got him to agree to let me tag along with the Smiths the following day. I sat upright and threw my arms around her, thanking her like I'd never thanked her before. But immediately after, I told her that I would need to let the Smiths know that I was coming, so that they knew to pick me up. That's when she told me that she had already done so, kissed my forehead goodnight, and placed the note that I would need in my backpack nearby. I thought I had the best mom ever. She always knew how to make everything better. The following morning, I think, must have been the longest morning that I have ever endured. It seemed to last forever. I think I got called out by teachers at least twice that day for staring at the clock and not paying attention. But time is an unstoppable beat that even the greatest anticipation cannot fully halt, and soon, noon had rolled around, and I knew that my ride would be here shortly. My next period was lunch, but I wouldn't have time to sit and eat. 10 minutes into that period, and there was an announcement over the PA system. I was to report to the office. My ride had arrived to pick me up. The trip to the hospital was a short one for where I went to school, only a mere 17-minute drive. Jason and I didn't actually talk too much on the way over. His parents tried to make small talk about my day at school and whatnot, but my responses were relatively brief, aside from my thank yous and letting me tag along. Really, I just wanted to see Heather, just like they all did. And soon, we were finally in the parking lot. I was the first out of the vehicle, but was resigned to waiting for everyone else. I had to follow them inside as they knew what room she would be in. Beeping devices, blipping screens, and the distant coughs of sick patients. Each one of these sounds seemed to be amplified tenfold, as beyond them, Heather's room was silent. When I turned the corner and saw her sitting in that bed, I knew it was her. Despite the bruised face and bandaged arms and distant stare, she didn't look all that different from what I remembered. Still, it was that exact look that also told me that she was different now. Heather was vibrant, energetic, and bombastic, but this person did not exhibit any of these traits. I wanted to say hello, and I'm sure I simply looked polite, but I was honestly a little afraid to hug my friend. I wasn't sure how she'd react, or how I might react to her apathy. Nancy and Tom, Jason's parents, sat at the edge of their daughter's bed. Jason stood beside it on the other end. I stood at the foot of it, albeit from about 6 feet away. It wasn't until Jason told his parents that he had to use the restroom and left the side of her bed that the Smiths asked me over to take his place. I had come all this way, so, reluctance aside, I did as they suggested. As soon as I was at her bedside, the apprehension washed away, and gratitude to be in her presence was all that remained. I knelt down beside her on the floor and simply started talking. I told her about my move, about how much I missed her, and how I was glad that she was safe now. Honestly, I didn't even expect a reaction, but as if something responding to all that I had said, Heather slowly turned to look at me. Her parents were so shocked and happy to see any sign of consciousness in their daughter that they immediately leapt up and started making their way around the bed. But they didn't see that look in her eyes, that terrible look of absolute dread. I'd never seen anything like it, but the Smiths didn't see it at all, nor did they see her lips move when she turned. because by the time they had gotten around to my side of the bed, Heather's expression had returned to apathy, seemingly looking more through me than at me now. Still, the Smiths didn't seem to mind. Progress was progress. I wanted to say something, but I wasn't even sure if I had perceived the event correctly. It wasn't too long after that Nancy and Tom wanted to share this moment with their absent son, and since he had yet to return, Tom went looking for him. Nancy kept talking to Heather the whole time that he was gone, as if she was just going to turn around now, awake and responsive. Unfortunately, Nancy's optimism was short-lived. Tom returned a while later, longer than it should have taken him to retrieve his son from the bathroom. And that's because Tom didn't just look in the bathroom. He looked everywhere. Jason was gone. The news was such a shock to Nancy that she fainted right there on the spot. Tom didn't want to believe that all of this was happening all over again, but to his dismay, hospital staff and police alike were unable to find Jason. Even though I looked that day, wanting to assist in any way that I could, also terrified that now my other friend was missing, my best friend, I found nothing. But there were two things stuck in my mind, refusing to subside. Heather's whispered words, so quiet that no one else heard them, that I barely heard them myself. It was more like she mouthed the words, "I'm not safe." But at the time, I didn't think much of it, that she mislabeled her situation due to whatever she had endured. But at that moment, wondering why the bathroom smelled like cigarette smoke, knowing smoking wasn't allowed on hospital grounds, never mind in the building itself. One thing was for sure. With each passing week, the older I got, and my mind's acuity expanding as well, I may not have understood all that was happening back then, nor did I have the means to really look into it or do anything about it. But one thing I did have back then was the determination to get to the bottom of all of this. And eventually, I would have all that I needed to learn what I wish that I could now forget. Well, just as one man's trash is another one's treasure, one sibling's escape is another one's departure. But I sure hope you don't depart for too long. Make sure to stop by again next weekend for more gore galore. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday. Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.